Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker. The COVID-19 shutdown forced many families to address educating their children on a much more personal level. With no real clear national plan for school reopenings, parents are having to rethink how to best prepare their children for the life that lies ahead. Many knew about homeschooling, but that was not the standard mindset. When the educational life support system was unplugged, families began to search for answers. Sam Sorbo, in some circles, is best known for her acting, but many know her as a homeschool advocate, author, organizer, and encourager. She's the author of Your Kids, an inspirational journey from self-doubter to homeschool advocate, and Teach from Love, a school year devotional for families. She's the host of the nationally syndicated Sam Sorbo radio show and has developed a video series entitled The Accidental Homeschooler for new parents to fit in. Sam Sorbo studied biomedical engineering at Duke University before pursuing a career in entertainment. An award-winning actress, author, radio host, international model, and homeschooling mom, she frequently speaks on education around the nation. She co-wrote, produced, and co-starred in the 2017 feature film Let There Be Light, executive producer Sean Hannity, director Kevin Sorbo. Her boys also act in the film, making it truly a family affair. The award-winning film was the fourth highest-grossing faith-based film of 2017. You can find out more about Sam Sorbo and the educational programs that she's connecting you with at samsorbo.com. Joining us now to talk about homeschooling in the face of COVID-19 and beyond is Sam Sorbo. Sam, good to see you again.
Hi there. It's great to be here. That was a long introduction.
It was, but when people know you in one environment and you get really plugged into that environment, model, actress, Sam Sorbo, Mrs. Kevin Sam Sorbo, they don't really look at you in where you dug in deep a long time ago and really established yourself as a homeschooling advocate. And now we're in this COVID-19 and people are finding out that there's so much bad schooling out there and kids are being indoctrinated into a non-biblical worldview environment and being forced to accept the changing of pronouns and locker rooms and all kinds of things that you and I would have never, in our growing up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, even considered as being the norm. But that is the norm of the government education system established under the Reagan administration, which never, in my opinion, should have ever been established at the federal level. Should always have been at the state, city, county, and even local level, because every community learns differently and every community has different social and economic challenges. But you've risen to the occasion that not only have you been doing this a long time and very successfully with your three children, but you have started groups and become a support system for many groups. In the face of COVID-19, people have decisions. Do they want their kids to go back into this environment? And what are their options when they don't feel qualified? They don't feel like they're made to do this. They don't know the new math. When did you last use algebra? And all these questions, and saying, my kid I was smarter than my Hungarian-born father in the American ways at age 10 than he was. He hadn't been here that much longer than me. So, when you look at situations like that, we're facing that kind of situation now where parents don't really know, it's have you done your homework? Well, that's the only question they ask, but they're not there at the table trying to do the math, because the way you and I did it, it was the gazentas. You remember the gazentas? 4 gazenta 12, 3 times. That
I
was
don't actually remember that, but I understand what you're saying.
right. That was the
But
math. That was the math we learned. You had multiplication tables. You memorized them. That's how you knew
yeah,
multiplication.
let me dissuade you. There is no new math. There's just new ways of doing math that are not as good as the old ways, because the old ways were there because they endured, because they're that good. The new math is simply a way to separate the child further from his parents. Also, to separate the child further from understanding math. Math is the language of logic. Math is simply a foreign language, and it is the language of logic. It's the expression of logic in mathematical terms. And so if you can dissuade the child from learning logic, you can convince them of almost anything, because they can't possibly come at it from a logical or rational viewpoint, which is what we're seeing in the schools today. We're seeing it on the streets today. So and I know that I've gone off on a little bit of a tangent, but my role in all of this, as I see it, is to empower parents to educate their children themselves, because that is the ideal solution. And people try to pin me down and say, well, how many parents should be, in your estimation, the percentage of parents that ought to be. I think every parent, you are the parent of that child. Nobody will love that child like you do, unless, and of course the outliers are the really, really bad parents. Okay, they probably shouldn't be home educating their kids, but every other parent should be. So, and I know that sounds, sort of extremist, but the fact is the schools aren't getting it done. So don't try to tell me, well, school is so much better. It's not, as a rule. Now, I did have somebody call me, was it yesterday? And she said, she's in Texas. She said, you wouldn't believe what's coming down the pike in the school system. And she cited the pornographic books that they are assigning. Now, mind you, they could be assigning Chaucer and Shakespeare and Bronte and, classics. They could. It's not that the classics no longer are relevant. They're classics because they are relevant, but they are not assigning those because there's a perversion afoot. And so she's seeing this stuff coming into the schools, and she's got a whole group of parents who are looking at that and going, oh, no. We can't sit by. Because now with COVID, it's all become transparent. So you started by saying COVID pulled the life support out from under the school system. The life support, I love that analogy, but I'm wondering if there's a more reasonable one, in that COVID dealt a blow to the school system, and it is currently on life support, because there are a lot of parents who are going in and saying, wow, we didn't realize it was putrefied from inside.
Right.
And now they can see that, because COVID has sort of opened the books on what's happening in the schools and what has been happening for decades. So now we have a chance to play catch up a little bit. She's got a whole coalition of parents. And she called me. She said, can you give me advice on how to start a charter school? And she followed it up with I'm not sure what authorities I need to contact. And I said to her, you shouldn't be thinking about any authorities at all. You are the authority. And there is one authority above you up there. But between you and your child, you are the authority. So you can get this done. You don't need to start a charter school. You can start a co-op, do a homeschool co-op, and just get it done. Don't talk about, well, we need a building and we need a secretary and we need paperwork and we need all this other stuff. Do it organically. Because here's the thing. We are all now, you and I went to high school in the same sort of neck of the woods. Having gone through high school, having gone to college, we have a mindset that has been engineered by our educators. And that mindset is that we can't do anything that we haven't been formally instructed in. But I would put to you that the opposite is actually the truth. Because did you go to school to produce and star in a program on television?
No.
No. Did your producer? Probably not. Like, you can learn things on the job. That's what they call on the job training. And in fact, there are a lot of employers now who are preferring on the job training because they don't like what the kids are being taught in college. And they're saying, I'd rather have them not educated, not schooled the way the colleges are doing it, and start sort of from the beginning and just give them on the job training. So my point is, you don't need to have a degree. You don't need to have somebody else put a gold stamp on your forehead, a gold star, and say, you can do this. I'm telling you, you can do it, because if you have any amount of ingenuity and you love your children, you will figure out how to get it done. And don't tell me, well, I don't remember algebra, because I got to tell you something. And this is the secret that you never learned in school. All the answers are in the book. It's right there on the pages. You didn't even need a teacher when you went to school. You could just look at the book, read the chapter, and then do the problems. It's all right there. So to take that, and this is what kills me, is parents say to me, I could never homeschool. I don't know where. I don't know how to do it. And I look at them and I go, okay, but you did graduate high school, right? And your child's what, third grade, fourth grade, right? And they're like, yeah. And I said, but you feel incapable of teaching what you know to a fourth grader? And yet, despite your incompetency, you're going to send your fourth grader back into that system that turned out the likes of you, the incompetent, the person who can't teach a fourth grader. Are you kidding me? I mean, that show, the TV show, Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? We're now at Are You Smarter Than a Second Grader? I mean, it's just crazy. It's crazy where we are right now.
The genesis of all this goes back to Deuteronomy 6, 5 through 9. And God said, you are to teach this to your children.
Diligently.
When COVID-19 came and everything started getting shut down, everybody said to me, what's your reaction to it? I said, God's saying education belongs in the home. You have failed. You have outsourced it. You have not done what I've asked you to do. And as a matter of fact, when Jesus was asked, what are the two greatest commandments? He began Deuteronomy 6, 5. Everyone within his hearing finished the rest of the concept, because that's the Jewish way of learning. We learn, our rabbis, they would give us the first 4 lines of a verse, and we had to finish the verse. That's how you memorized Scripture in the synagogue. So when he said, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your strength, we all hear in our heads, and these commandments I give you this day shall be upon your heart, and you shall teach them to your children. That's what we hear. The whole concept. It is not snippet theology. It's not a snippet commandment. So God always intended mom, dad to talk about him, which was the foundation of life, and then all things, setting the table for discussion, talking about how goes on in Deuteronomy, weights and measures. It goes on and talks about in Genesis about the cubit. I mean, you learn math in Genesis. You learn all these things. You learn the judicial system with Jethro. You learn all kinds of things that we would teach in school. God says, I'm going to give you all this instruction right here. Here is the book. You can have sub-books and break it down in your mathematics and your quantum physics and all those things, but that's all there too. But we've lost our way, and we've become dependent and outsourced to total strangers, not knowing any of their ideologies, having them conform to keep a job, and bringing everything that you and I do not agree upon. And that is that, well, today you're Elliot, but tomorrow you want to be called Esther. That's okay with us.
Oh my God.
But
I'll tell you something. my oldest went to public school for 2 years. In fact, we moved to that area because the schools were so good, and I put good in quote marks. And so he went to first and second grade, and I remember when they would post the teacher assignments the day before school started because they didn't want any flack. You were assigned your teacher, that was that, and they didn't want any feedback from you about whether you wanted the teacher or not. And my friend went, and of course I had no idea because we were new there, but my friend went and she saw that I got Mrs. Smith, and she said, "Oh, you got Mrs. Smith. She's fantastic. You got the best first grade teacher for your son." And I was like all excited. And I dropped him off with a complete stranger, as you say, because I trusted that the school system knew what they were doing, because that's what they're paid for. We hire them and they're paid by us, the taxpayers, to know what they're doing. But here's the thing. Why was she so beloved? I figured out during his second year, because the kids would go back to see her because she kept a bowl of candy.
Mm.
And so if they went back as a fifth grader and they gave her a hug, they got a piece of candy. So I'm not saying that she wasn't a good teacher, but the reason that she had a great reputation is because she kept giving the kids candy. That's not my definition of a good teacher. That's probably not your definition of a good teacher. And yet I was never encouraged to analyze or take a closer look at how was she teaching my child? What was she teaching my child? I don't know. Now, second grade was a completely different experience. Also, had no idea what the teacher was. We were assigned the worst classroom. I think people have gone on record saying that was the worst second grade that the school has ever had, because of the way that it was set up and the way that they apportioned between two different teachers, and they had 5 problem students in the classroom, and there were some other issues. And so I'm just saying, and I hobbled along for that year until towards the end I realized, it's not working. It's not working for me. And I tell that story in my book, by the way. They're Your Kids, because I want to share with people, at some point you need to take a step back, like the woman in Texas who called me yesterday. You need to take a step back and say, okay, is this serving my child? And I would encourage people, because we are so indoctrinated with the idea that education is in a classroom, 4 walls and a roof, a teacher at a blackboard or a whiteboard now, right? This is our idea that checks the box education, and it's wrong. And so I really encourage parents, take a step back and ask yourself, what is my highest aspiration for my child? Is it just to go to college? Is it just to get a job? Is it to make $1 million before they're 26? Like, really, what's your highest aspiration for your child? And then set about trying to achieve that without trying to check in all the boxes.
Children certainly are a priority, but you have a board on your website that says what school teaches children. 1, truth comes from authority. 2, intelligence is the ability to remember and repeat. 3, accurate memory and repetition are rewarded. Non-compliance is punished. And conform intellectually and socially.
Conform. That is what school has taught us, right? We conform. Part of the reason parents don't want to homeschool their kids is they don't want to be the odd man out. Well, guess what? COVID has made everybody the odd man out. So I'm encouraging parents, because of COVID, give it a shot. Just try it. And what I see happening is parents are getting closer relationships with their children, and they're saying, you know what? This is actually better. It's so much better than I had imagined it could be. And it's just better for me and for my child to have this relationship. Because what happens is the school forms a wedge between the child and the parent. It can't help but. When you drop your child off at school, you are tacitly telling your child, I can't, they can, listen to them, they have the authority. When your child comes home and says, Daddy, you have to sign this. It's a permission slip. You have to sign it. And you say, okay, give it to me, I'll sign it. Oop, you just went under the authority of the school. Your authority no longer is predominant. then later on, when the school challenges your child and says, well, you don't know what gender you are, you can't possibly know that until you decide. And you go home and say, Daddy, I'm trying to decide what gender I am. And he says, don't be ridiculous. You know what gender you are. You think that he's dumb because the predominant authority has told you you can't possibly know what gender you are, or what have you. I mean, I could go on and on about the perversions in our schools, not to mention that Planned Parenthood is very much influencing what's being taught in our schools, because it's a very lucrative business. And what's the best way? The best way to get customers is to get them when they're young and train them to become customers, and then you own them, and you have an unlimited supply of revenue. So I'm just saying, there's a whole world out there in the homeschool community that is begging you to take a second look and to give it a shot. And, if it doesn't work out after the COVID thing has kind of run its course, and I'm certainly hopeful that it will run its course and we can get back to what used to be normal, not a new normal, but the old normal is perfectly good for me, and I prefer it. Then you can decide and you can say, you know what, maybe it didn't work for you for whatever reason. I can't imagine. But I mean, I know people who work full time and they bring their kids to work with them. You can train a child. This idea that children need to be put into, when you go to church, that children need to go to Sunday school to be separated from their parents in church. I disagree with that. I know why the churches did it, because the kids were away from their parents all week in school, and then all of a sudden their parents had to discipline and had to, keep control of them, and it wasn't happening. And the churches said, you know what if we just made a school for the kids to go to, and then they could learn on their level. I disagree with dumbing down the Bible for your child. Why dumb it down? It's a fantastic story. There are some phenomenal stories in the Bible. Sure. Screen some of the parts that get a little too graphic and a little too gory. That's fine for the younger kids, yeah. But turning the Bible into a bunch of vegetables, what does that do in the child's mind? And then it's reinforced in school that the Bible is just a collection of fairy tales and it's a fun cartoon. No wonder 85% of professing Christian youth are losing their religion by the time they graduate college. It's not because it happens in college. It's that in college they're challenged and they have no firm foundation for their faith because their parents sent them to Sunday school, had no idea what the churches were teaching in Sunday school, and didn't follow it up at home. And then it was reinforced in our school system that no, in fact, the Bible is a collection of fairy tales and every child is just a happy accident, or maybe not a happy accident, maybe a disastrous accident, who knows? And they have no intrinsic value because accidents have no value, and survival of the fittest. And by the way, if you're teaching a child that survival of the fittest is the law of the land, because that is Darwin's proposition, that is the theory of evolution, survival of the fittest, well then why would you have a problem with the rioting and looting? There's no problem there. It's just survival of the fittest. It's just playing out on the streets what we've been teaching our youth all through their public schooling.
And Sam, you bring up a very strong parallel. When we've dropped our kids off at Sunday school or kids congregation or whatever it is we call it, and the parents regroup with the children, the conversation is always one-sided. What did you learn today in Sunday school?
If there is that conversation.
If there is that conversation. There's never the conversation from the kids, what did you learn? What did you hear in the sermons? That's number one.
That's an interesting point.
Then you have the fact that on Sunday we went and we did this thing, but we don't do it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We don't ever open a Bible at home. We don't ever do a Bible study at home. So whatever we do on Sunday is not really relevant. So we drop our kids off at school. They come home from school, we give them their playtime, we give them their screen time, we give them something to eat, and then we ask them to do their homework. we don't participate in doing their homework. They go do their homework, and then you call up to them, have you done your homework? Yes, I've done my homework. Okay. Yeah. Say, well, can I, watch something or do something for, sure, for 30 minutes, and then it's bedtime. There's no exchange of any value, and there is no replication. I don't see mom and dad. I don't see dad studying his work. I don't see mom studying her work. You don't see your children studying their work. There is no exchange of information in that. It's what we've done at church, and it doesn't work because they have no connection with it, because it's irrelevant. Because if it was relevant, mom and dad would do it Monday through Sunday. They do it on their own.
Yeah, I mean, you're making a gross generalization, but I'm sure that that's applicable in a majority of cases, actually. And that's why I wrote Teach from Love, which is a homeschool. It's not a homeschool. Sorry, it's a school year devotional, so that and it's very short, just short little stories, one every day of the week, 5 days a week, I should say, and it's stories that bring out godly virtues and principles for you to discuss with your child, just to get the conversation started, so that at least you're having that conversation. But it's true. We've been taught in our school system to bifurcate things, to separate things. So I don't know if you remember, but when I went to school, if you were a math science person, you were that person, but you weren't a language arts person, not a humanities history person. But if you were humanities history, then you couldn't possibly be math and science, because those are separated. They're different. And I'm here to tell you, they're very much integrated, very much integrated. In fact, it's all knowledge, okay? And like I said before, math is a foreign language. So don't tell me that if you're a language person, math will elude you. That's just a lie, frankly. But we've all grown up with that lie. And so it's very hard for us to step outside of that box thinking and move into this idea that, wow, education could be really anything that I choose. I mean, my son had to do a project he was doing a project as an art grant proposal. He was supposed to propose something that was somehow artistic, that he was trying to raise funds for. And he said, I really don't want to do this. And I said, well, why not? And he said, I'm just not interested in art. And I said, well, I'm sure there's something. And he's like, no. And I pressed him. And I finally said, look, just spit out what is it that you might want to work on, and let's see if we can make it artistic somehow. Well, he wanted to work on something to do with Minecraft. I said, is there any design element to Minecraft? He said, well, yeah, you have to design these it's basically engineering, but you're designing these small machines within the game that then produce things and can do things for you. And I said, well, design is art. And he looked at me. It never occurred to him that he's an engineer. He wants to be an engineer, and that's really who he is. It never occurred to him that there is artistry in engineering, but of course there is. So we tailored the project so that it was something that would interest him. My gosh, he did a phenomenal job on it, and yet it fulfilled the requirements for the course. And so what I'm saying to people is you have to figure out how to think outside the box. And the problem is we've all been schooled inside the box. So in fact, really, some of the most the most successful people that we know of, the creatives who have created amazing things for humanity, didn't graduate college. And I think there's something to be said about that. Steve Jobs dropped out of college because it was too expensive. And he created Apple that's been giving a gift to humanity for years now. Same thing with Bill Gates, although I won't go into his politics, or Steve Jobs for that matter, Richard Branson, and many of my close friends never graduated college. And part of that is, and what Steve Jobs pointed out in his infamous speech at Stanford, the what was it? The graduation speech that he gave. He said, if you haven't graduated yet, run, get out of school, because school is putting a ceiling on you and what your dreams are and what your aspirations can be. It does. I don't know that it's on purpose. I'm not implying that it's on purpose. I think actually most teachers are phenomenal people who really just want to pay it into the culture, into society, and help and teach. And yet they're working in a system that is no longer viable. It makes life too difficult. You've got kids who can't perform to the test, and yet everything now is about the test. There's something very sad about when a child is going to study and their first question is only, and their only concern is, will this be on the test? Then you've lost them, because they don't want to learn anything. They're only learning it to get a good grade on the test so that they don't incur the wrath of mommy and daddy or what have you. But children are born innately curious. So what happens to them that they're no longer curious? And I would say it's because we've codified education to such a degree that it's now just checking off boxes. Will it be on the test?
And that directly translates to seminary and what we're seeing seminaries produce, which is you're finding pastors who are repeating the same, and we're watching what's happening with the church growth and transformation in people's lives in relationship with the Lord, and they're dusting off what their professor taught them, and it's the same model, it's the same homiletics, the same hermeneutics, the same exegesis that they were taught and have been taught, and we're seeing the product of that in these young, upcoming, didn't go to seminary, came out, radically changed, radically transformed, fresh new message that the seminarians would say, that doesn't fit the model. Well, guess what? It doesn't fit the model, but it transforms lives. So there's a great deal of support for it when you see it. Look, you were a biomedical science major in college. There's nothing more analytical, and here you are in the arts. And your logic center has helped you frame the accidental homeschooler. It's helped you frame many of the programs which you've been able to launch by applying logic, reason, and knowing what's effective to package something in order to make sure that you've covered all the bases, and then you put the creative spin on it, and you've found the perfect blend, and you're changing lives. Because I've watched what you're doing with the accidental homeschooler. You have two groups there in Florida that you're supporting, and you're teaching them how to grow, and you're mentoring, which is the oldest biblical concept that there is the older. This is why the grandparents live with the kids who live with the grandkids, right, because there was a mentorship. You reach the age where you could speak into their lives and grow it. You're a mentor now. You're not just a homeschooling mom. Your kids are now getting older. You're now mentoring homeschooling moms and passing the model down. That's not really a model, but it's a framework. It says you don't have to start scattered. I'm not going to hem you in. I'm not going to put you in a box, but I'm going to give you ideas that are going to stimulate original thought and creativity and ways to do things that you didn't think were possible before, that you actually were so trained and indoctrinated into securing permission to do it that you were frozen in place because you didn't know who to ask if it was okay for you to do it. You are actually a catalyst and a mentor to set them free and to fly, little bird, and find out what works. And it's amazing that those and look, this is all starting the 5th year that we've been talking with Sam Sorbo. A lot about it's about artistic work and about new movies and new projects, but this is the heart. This is your mother's heart. This is your heart for your children. This is your spousal heart to honor your husband by helping him to impart when he's not working, when he's not doing something, to engage with the children and to find ways to be involved, because that's Kevin's heart. He may be Goliath, but or Hercules or whatever it was that he
Careful.
was. Yeah, Thor, whatever he was when he fell in love with him. But this is what family's supposed to be, and this is what community was designed to be. So it's a community coming together.
Yeah.
And you've been able to harness, and look, I'm going to take it back to the Bible. This was Acts chapter 2. They met together daily. They studied together daily. They had fellowship together daily. They broke bread together daily. They gave to one another. So these are my 2nd-year books. I'm going to give them to you because your kid's moving up. You're going to give me your 3rd-year books, your 4th-year books. We're going to exchange information. Guess what? We've got a community. And when there's somebody in need, we're going to come to that need. And you're sick, you can't get your kid to co-op, I'll take your kid to co-op. Your kid doesn't have to miss because mom's sick.
Right.
It's all a biblical model being played out in an educational environment that says I can take these biblical principles, I can apply them in real life and not call them biblical. I don't have to put the Christian stamp on them. This
Right.
is free to raise my children, impart ethics, value, knowledge, and then show them how to do what school never taught me and
Right.
why I left. And that was how to apply it.
Well, I mean, school doesn't teach us how to balance a checkbook. School doesn't teach how to comfort somebody who's mourning. School doesn't teach how to fall in love, how to break up with somebody, school doesn't teach important things. But they are focused on teaching sex ed. They are focused on, I mean, if you look at what the school is focused on and you consider all the things that the school is not focused on, you'd have to be crazy to send your kid to school. And it's because you've bought into the whole treadmill thing that if you do this and then you do that and then your kid gets to college, they will have a good job and they'll have job security and they'll make a ton of money or something along those lines. And for some reason, that's the highest aspiration. And I'll be honest with you, I remember when I was, I think this was probably before I was a believer, and I met some people and they said, yeah, we're excited because our son's going into the seminary. He wants to be a pastor. And I thought, that's the craziest thing ever. How's he going to make any money? Pastors don't make any money. Why would he want to do that? Well, don't we want our children to fulfill their dreams? Or do you want to just impose your dreams on your child, and this is what your child is going to be? And I would caution you against that, because it typically doesn't end very well. So you say that I'm a mentor. I just feel like I've discovered the secret sauce. I really have. I've discovered magic, and it's biblical, and it happens to be biblical. Who knew that God had the recipe, like the best recipe, right? I'm just cooking with God's recipe, and it's coming out aromatic and beautiful, okay? And so I feel compelled to share that with other families. You say it's in an educational environment. I would say to you it's in a family environment, and it happens to be educational. Why is it educational? Because children are curious and they need to learn. It should be the most natural thing. But when we send our kids into an institution, it becomes institutionalized, and it's much less fun. And they begin just checking off the boxes. And pretty soon they hate learning. I don't know about you, but when I graduated high school, it was like, ugh, I hope I never have to crack another book again. And then of course I went to college. When I finally I had to take a year off from school because I was working on an ulcer because I was so stressed about all of the about getting good grades so that I could get a good job, so that I could get a good career, so that I could support myself. It was ingrained in me that that was the plan. And when I went back to school, having modeled internationally and been extraordinarily successful, and I had a big bank account, and I went back to school, and all of a sudden school was fun again. School had never been fun. I shouldn't say again, because I nearly flunked first grade because school was so scary and awful to me. So when I went back and I took the hardest courses I'd ever taken, and I aced them all because I had nothing standing in my way, because learning was fun, that's kind of when I think God really showed me that I had been on one path and I really needed to switch paths. And so that's when I made the switch, and I said, okay, then I'm going to do everything else that I want to do instead of this one thing, biomedical engineering, which would lead to medical school and then residency and specialty, and like it was a one-track path. And I said, okay, I'm going to switch gears, and I'm going to do literally everything else that I wanted to do with my life: learn languages, travel, do acting, be creative. And I'm so lucky that I saw this as a binary choice, and I just went for it. And I'm hoping maybe that story can inspire other people, because I'd been dissuaded from ever pursuing acting when I was in high school. I was told you can't pursue acting because nobody ever succeeds. But it was through acting that I met my husband. So.
Sam, there's one gift you have which needs to be bottled, and that is the ability to take something which is traditionally mundane and set people free to grab a hold of what interests them. Your son in Minecraft, when you boiled it down to it being design and it being art, when you broke it down and translated it for him, and you spoke a language that he could connect with, then it stimulates people to connect. You have this new blog, The Accidental Homeschooler, and you are encouraging moms and dads and families to come together and look at things differently, to embrace them differently, to say, okay, they called it this, but it's not really this. Okay?
Oh, to that, I have to speak to that because, with COVID and people were all of a sudden these accidental homeschoolers, and it was all on them all of a sudden. And they say, oh my gosh, homeschooling is so hard. I can't get the kid to sit still. I can't make him behave. I can't make sure that they get their work done. It's too much work for me. And I want to tell parents, back the truck up, just calm down, have a seat. You're not going to lose anything in the course of 5 or 10 months. You're just not. Kids are resilient. And if they don't learn it this year, they will next year, right? As long as you don't do things that prevent them from learning, like make it so dull that they can't possibly keep their eyes open, for instance. But oh shoot, I was going to say that I was hearing all of this feedback that homeschooling's really hard, and I did a series of vlogs called "Homeschooling is Easy, Parenting is Hard," because homeschooling is really, a lot of it is about discipline. And it's not discipline of the child that's predominant. It's actually discipline of the parent. You need to discipline yourself. So parents say to me, I couldn't homeschool. I have no patience. Well, guess what? Maybe God gave you your kids to teach you patience. And, the opposite of patience is anger. Think about it. And so why are you so angry? And if you have an anger problem, maybe you should deal with that. And, by the way, patience is a virtue. So maybe it's time to exercise your virtue a little bit. I'm just saying, we have to think about things differently. So, and also, just so you know, since they implemented Common Core, which was the ninth overhaul of our public school system, our curriculum, in less than 30 years, test scores have gone down. Now, how could that be when they promised us that test scores would come up with Common Core? How did they promise us that? They never tested it. So they literally just pulled the promise from their rear end and said it as a way of convincing us we needed to be on board with Common Core. Why? It's a lot of money in education. There's a lot of money. Your student is worth a lot of money to the school. So one of the things that the gal from Texas who I was talking to said to me, my kids do sports and I want them to still be able to do sports. So I think I need them to, still have a school so that they can compete and stuff. And I drilled down with her and she said, well, actually the traveling team is where they can really shine. I said, well, you don't need to be in a school for the traveling team. She said, no, but they do like the school sports at the high school. I said, well, then go to the high school and say, what can we work out here? I don't want to jump through your hoops. You don't want to have to jump through mine. My kids want to do your sports. And I said, don't go to the administrator, go to the coach. If the coach wants your kids on the team, then they will figure out a way to get it done. And also if they want the money, okay? Because it all comes down to money. Sadly, it's a business. It all comes down to money. So we have to really take a step back and start thinking about these things and reimagining, which is hard to do because we've been taught, stop imagining. Just, do what's on the test. Answer the question as it's been asked. Don't think outside the box. Keep inside the box. Conform, right? And yet here we are, COVID, this magnificent disruptor, as horrendous as it is, and it's been horrendous, and I don't take anything from that. That is absolutely the case. At the same time, there is a silver lining. And the disruptor has offered us all an opportunity to reimagine what our children's education might be and where it can get them. And that's a beautiful thing.
It is. All right, we've run out of time, but I want to know, what is the new project? You've got a new documentary coming out?
I do. So it's out already. It's called leadersforlifefilm.com, and it's available at leadersforlifefilm.com. It's I just participated in it, but they did a fantastic job, and I highly recommend it. It is a great piece about the life movement. If you're not a single issue voter, you might want to consider it, because without life, there's not much else to it. And then the other one that I want to talk to you about is Liberty Lockdown, which gives a really interesting accounting of the different events that took place as we started to lose our freedoms under COVID with these draconian measures that the government took. Many of them completely unprecedented and many of them unscientifically supported, despite what we think. So I would encourage you to go to Liberty Lockdown is available on Vimeo, so you can just search it up, and that's a rental. And then leadersforlifefilm.com is offered for free. So I encourage you to watch it with your kids, maybe not too young, but teens, preteens, early teens, that kind of age, because this is a conversation that we need to be having. And I encourage parents, have political conversations with your kids. Don't dumb down the real world for your kids. They know they're growing up in the real world. You know it. So there's no reason to try to sort of protect them from it in the sense of never talking about it. Talk about it. Talk about it at their level, and encourage them to be thinking about it.
Amen. All of our best to Kevin and the family. We will see you again.
SamSorbo.com.
Yes, SamSorbo.com. And
if you want to find out what we're doing in terms of films, because we do have several other projects going, go to SorboFamilyFilmStudios.com.
Sorbo
Family
Films Studios.com. All right, we'll put that in the show notes.
Thank you so much.
Always great to see you.
You too.
Always a great hour, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. God
Thank
bless.
you so much. God bless.
You. All right, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.